this afternoon with my friend and colleague again from the Faculty of Education, Dr. Francois Desjardins, and we're going to have another conversation about the questions and comments that arose out of the tutorials for this past week. And we're going to start with one that's a holdover from last week, that is there a distinction between group work, cooperation, and collaboration? Is collaboration necessary for problem-based learning, or is problem-based learning necessary for collaboration? Some thoughts, Francois?
Yeah, loaded question and under 2 minutes. Okay, the distinction between group work, cooperation, and collaboration, that's the easy part. Group work is anytime you get a group of individuals actually working on a task towards a common goal. Now, the distinction, or the interesting distinction, becomes when you start looking at cooperation and collaboration, and this is where group work tends to either work or break down. Cooperation is very simply when can be described as when a group of people will sort of like tackle a common problem, but will assign themselves each some separate roles or some separate tasks. They will break down the large task or the large work to be done into subtasks and then assign it to individuals without necessarily having everybody having an overall view before or after of the entire global task, except maybe a specific leader. Or even if the entire group has an overall view, they still then just concentrate on their own task without necessarily interacting with the others. Collaboration means that everybody has not only a good global view of the problem or the task to begin with, but they all constantly interact with each other towards working on all aspects of solving the problem or doing the task, if you want, or constructing the project. And this way, this takes advantage really of the idea of that collective intelligence and all the bits and pieces of knowledge and expertise and experience that everyone has. On top of that, you also get everyone getting a chance to offer some resistance, some constructive resistance throughout the process, which will usually make the end results far stronger. Is it necessary for problem-based learning? I would suggest that it absolutely is critical for problem-based learning, and the problem-based learning is not necessary for collaboration to occur, because you can collaborate without necessarily having a problem. But for problem-based learning, doing it in a cooperative manner is equivalent to doing it in an isolated, individualistic manner, and you miss out, if you want, on the entire possibility of getting other people's views and input, but also of having to face actual refutation, if you want, attempts by others, which would actually make the conjectures and the move forwards much stronger. And obviously I'm using conjecture and refutation in the Popperian or Karl Popper sense, which I'm sure Roland will give you the reference at one point or another. But it's that idea of collaboration, meaning that you get both sides of the problem being looked at by a group of people, and therefore what is being moved forward ends up being far, far stronger. I would suggest that actually cooperating on problem-based learning is actually pointless.
Okay, going on to the next question. The next question is actually sort of an amalgam of what showed up in these discussion notes after the tutorials, and then I added a little bit to it towards the end. So we'll just take a look at teaching as a whole to begin with. So teaching would be making sure that learning is occurring in the classroom. And what was added, meaning that the students are actually retaining the information. So of course what we're talking about there is a definition of learning that's embedded. So learning becomes, according to that second phrase, learning is a retention of information. And then I added in, logically then, if learning is an internal process, in other words, inside of our minds, how does the teacher ensure that learning is occurring? Is it even possible? You want to tackle that one, or shall I add in the next question too, defining teacher? Because it's related.
I'll tackle that one, and I'll actually have a look at the second one at the same time, which is, can the defining teacher, can a more knowledgeable other be a thing if not a person? The whole idea of teaching, making sure that learning is occurring, you can't make sure of anything as a teacher. Let's face it, if we agree, and there seems to be consensus today, actually since probably the last 2,000 or 3,000 years, that anything that is however we define learning, it is within the mind that it occurs. Whether you look at it from a cognitivist or behaviorist or whatever, learning occurs within the mind. And having said this, at best, and even the most behavioral approaches will agree to this. At best, you may be able to create a situation where you can get some predictive behaviors from an individual, but you can never make sure that any kind of learning is occurring within the minds of the learners. From a constructivist or social constructivist or connectivist perspective, whichever other perspective you want to take it, the best a teacher can do is set up situations, set up problems, create a context, create an environment, and even create some situations that would promote some dialogue, if you want, or promote some action that would foster some learning, possibly. And if it got skin sense, if you want, you may be able to help a learner that's in the process of tackling a specific task by offering them some additional information or offering them some help in the form of information, in the form of demonstrations, or even in the form of questions sometimes to lead them into a process. But the learning process is entirely owned by the learner. Having said this, does this mean that the students are actually retaining the information? No. Learning is not about retaining information, because if you just consider retaining information, you'll stack. It's equivalent to stacking piles and piles of books, but I mean, there's no structure to it. You can't find anything. Learning is more about having a cognitive structure, a structure of the knowledge that you do have, an organization, a structure in which you can not only find stuff, but also that you can use stuff in the sense that whatever you've got up there. And to be able to use it, you have to have these preferred paths. You have to create these preferred paths. The knowledge, the information that you have has to fit together. It has to agree it together. It has to be consistent. It has to be coherent. And when you acquire new knowledge, if you're just going by memory, then it doesn't affect the rest of your knowledge. If you're actually learning whatever is coming in that's new, you get these aha moments. What's an aha moment or a eureka? It's when this new piece that is unknown is recognized, so it matches something else that you've got in there, and it actually then fits in your cognitive structure and actually shakes it up a little bit and maybe modifies what you've had before, as well as adding something to it. So it's not just an accumulation of retained information. It is a modification of the existing structure that occurs when new stuff also comes in. So can the teacher just be somebody that makes sure that this occurs? No, the teacher has to do something differently. First of all, they can't make sure, they can foster it. And then the second part, can they be a more knowledgeable other in sense of kind of slideshow or virtual tutoring, play a role of the teacher? Not really. They can be information that can be accessed by the learner, but these inanimate objects, if you want, or even if they are highly interactive and so on and so forth, and they've got all these predicted reactions built into them because they're software and they're made to run on computers and whatnot, they still cannot. How could I put this? They still cannot go inside the learner's head and add something or modify something. The best these pieces can do, much like the teacher, is to create a context. So it's when you're defining teaching, we have to back off a little bit in terms of saying, well, the teacher is one that makes it possible for the learner to learn. No, because as far as I'm concerned, learners can learn without teachers, but teachers can't teach without learners to begin with. And just having access to all this other information is good for the learner, but it does not play the role of a teacher, who is the one that can recognize, if you want, when the learner is going outside that potential cone of experience, if you want. It's a little bit, last quick example, a good teacher, if you want, is not somebody who pushes the student and gives them the right answers. A good teacher is a teacher that uses pedagogy appropriately is one that recognizes when the learner goes outside what is likely, the experience that are likely to lead them outside of what the target knowledge and the target competencies to be developed are, and that will do something to bring them back within the potential realm of the experiences that they can go through, that will lead them to the actual target knowledge that you want. But the one thing that the teacher can do is, as long as the student is within that cone, if you want, of potential things that will lead them to the learning, they can't force them through that. It's impossible.
The next question, I'm going to skip over to the last question in a second because it seems the most appropriate at this point in time. So given that we were talking then about a teacher setting a context within which learning can occur, can you make a link to the structuring of the video case context, situation, or settings within the PBLOs, and how do those actually play a role in this learning kind of piece that we're dealing with? And the second question that seemed to come up out of the discussion was, how can we build a context to ensure that the problems that we want to be addressed are included, or should we even try? And that last piece was my attempt to introduce some possibilities that there is something else going on.
Okay, structuring a video case, context, situation, settings. Yes, the PBLOs are designed to exactly do that. My only major objection is anytime we say we want to ensure, and that's a typical teacher kind of approach. We want to make sure that something occurs. Sorry, you can't. All right, just forget it. Don't try. And you know, as soon as we get off that boat, we'll be okay. Now, can the PBLOs actually be useful? Yes, they can be useful in the sense that the structure of the PBLO presents a problem. It's always an artificial kind of situation, if you want, but it still presents a context in which a problem has to be teased out, if you want. And the kinds of questions that a PBLO presents initially, the analysis kinds of questions and the synthesis kinds of questions at the end, are really structured and designed, if you want, to help the learner sort of like focus on what are the kinds of questions I should be or I could be asking. And by going through many PBLOs, eventually what happens is as a student, if you want, can eventually sort of like start getting used to understanding what are the kinds of questions I should be asking when faced with a problem initially, or faced with a situation that I think is problematic, and how would I actually be able to get the problem out of there through an analysis process. And the kind of reflection that the PBLO can promote is very likely, or is how can I put it, very conducive to this kind of reflection. But what the PBLO can do, sorry, and it was never the pretext that it did that, is that it is no way going to ensure that process occurs. Okay? Even with a teacher present, nobody can ensure that process occurs. Now, put the PBL in the context where you've got a group of students working together. I think that probably is the best possible mix you can get, because you will have different perspectives looking at the same situation, different perspectives looking at the questions and coming up with different answers. And it's in that discussion, dialogue, analysis process that you are more likely than not to get learning to occur, because people will have their own cognitive structures shaken up by other people's questions. That's something that will be highly constructivist, social constructivist, will stay within Vygotsky's zone of proximal development because the other learners are of equivalent level, and so on and so forth. That is the best possible scenario you can come up with. The teacher can be present or not, unimportant. Okay? But does that mean that the video cases actually replace the teacher? No, they don't. They were never intended to replace the teacher. They are merely a well-structured additional tool to help the teacher present a context of a problem, containing potentially a problem to solve. It's basically like in medicine when they do problem-based learning, they come up with these fictitious cases that they come up with. You know, here's a person walking in your office with these kinds of things. Give us a diagnosis. Well, the PBLOs, in a sense, approach it from the same kind of perspective. I don't know if that answers your question.
I think we're about running out of time, so thank you very much again, and hopefully we'll be able to do this a couple more times before the course is ended. So thank you very much.
Absolutely. With pleasure. Ciao.